Hey there. I'm excited to announce this to you today. This is what you've been waiting for in your spiritual quest. This is something I've wanted to do for a long time, and I'm finally ready to announce it that it's ready to go. It's the Grief to Growth Community Circle. Now, this is a sanctuary where like-minded souls are united in their journey through grief and towards personal transformation. It's more than just a place. It's a beginning. It's a commitment to growth and understanding. Here you're finding not just a community, but you're entering a circle of trust and depth. You're going to engage with interactive coursework. You'll dive into exclusive podcast episodes and partake in discussions that illuminate the path from mourning to empowerment. This is a realm where every question is honored and every individual's journey is validated. To be part of this exclusive circle, visit us at grieftogrowth.com/community or look for the chat icon at the bottom of every page on the main website. Remember that entry is a privilege because I want to ensure that every member is as dedicated and genuine as you are. You must apply to join, but the journey within is worth every step. So go ahead and join us today. Check it out, grieftogrowth.com/community, and I look forward to seeing you there.
Hi there. Welcome to Grief to Growth podcast. Your host is Brian Smith, spiritual seeker, best-selling author, grief survivor, and life coach. Brian believes that the worst tragedies of life provide the greatest opportunity for growth. Brian says he was planted, not buried, and he is here to help you grow where you've been planted by the difficulties in life. In each episode, Brian and his guests will share what has helped them to survive and thrive. It is his sincere hope this episode helps you today.
Hey, everybody, this is Brian Smith back with another episode of Grief to Growth. And today I've got with me a fellow Shining Light parent, Allie Norell. And I'm going to introduce Allie, and then we're going to have a conversation like we always do. Allie Norell is a mother of 3 children here and 1 in spirit. She's a wife, an author, a medium, a healer, and an inspirational speaker. And despite having one foot firmly in the other, she believes in demystifying spiritualism and taking it out of the shadows and into public awareness as a thing of positivity, to aid those who grieve and to offer hope to all that death is a transition rather than the end. In July of 2014, Allie's youngest daughter, Romy, died at just the age of 5 months. In the months that follow, Allie found her way to writing to express her grief and to make sense of the spiritual experience she had, many of which were corroborated by spiritual mediums, and we'll talk about that in a little while. Allie wrote a book called The Truth Inside as an homage to her daughter's brief existence, and she hopes to bring comfort to others who grieve and to show them that it's possible to live a life full of positivity and purpose following loss. She credits her daughter with leading her to a childhood passion, which is writing. So with that, I want to welcome Allie Norell.
Hi, Brian. Thank you so much for having me.
Hi, Allie. It's good to meet you, a fellow person who has a child in spirit. And today, what we want to do over the course of our conversation is learn about your journey since Romy, passed. And I usually ask people that have someone that passed to tell us about that person, but she was only 5 months old. So what was that period of time like?
Sure. I'd like to start actually, Brian, by saying also how sorry I am for your loss to your daughter, Shayna, right?
Mm-hmm, yes.
Yeah, I'm so sorry for your loss also, but also delighted to talk to somebody else who is, coming through that period of grief with positivity and hope. It's a strange one because obviously Romy was so very young when she died, and probably that's the question that I get asked a lot about The Truth Inside, about the book that I wrote. A lot of the things that I'm talking about refer to her almost as if she was a more fully formed, a more adult person and not just a 5-month-old baby. And that's because I think I can say that to me, I almost from the moment of conception, she felt to me like a soul rather than a baby, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know that there's this kind of myth among a lot of bereaved parents. I've heard this a lot, that I knew they weren't going to be here for very long. I've heard a lot of bereaved parents say, particularly mothers, that they may have had this feeling from the moment their child was born. And I can't say that I felt that at the outset with Romy, but there were some aspects of my relationship with her that were very different. I have 3 other children. 2 were born before her and 1 came after. And there were some very strong differences. And I can only describe it as a kind of, obsession wouldn't be too strong a word, really. I was really obsessed about having a third child, in a way that was a little out of character for me. I think I was, really happy with my husband. And I were both very happy with the two children that we had. We were very blessed. They're beautiful children. I'd always wanted a big family, but, I was 39, 40 when we came to this point. So it wasn't as if, I wasn't in my 20s and we were saying, hey, should we have 5 kids? So I remember pursuing this idea to the point that, we were fighting over it. It was really ridiculous. And I do remember saying to my husband at one point, look, this isn't just about me wanting a baby, another baby. It's a feeling I've got that there's somebody else who's supposed to be here. And I feel like one of our children is standing behind a door and you want to keep the door closed and I want to open it. I can't close the door on my child. And that's, so it was a very different feeling. Obviously I wanted all of my children equally, but there was an edge to it with Romy. And that followed through really. I think even in the brief time that she was with us, which was, more or less 5 months, I didn't particularly acknowledge this at the time, but I remember my father saying to me after she had passed, he said something like, we all noticed that you were kind of obsessed with her. You didn't ever want to be away from her. And it's true. We were kind of glued together. And so, it's very different from an experience that somebody might have with an adult child.
Did she have a situation from birth, a congenital thing that you knew that she was going to pass, or?
No,
okay.
No, nothing.
Okay.
Perfectly healthy pregnancy. We were very fortunate. I've had 4 children, 4 home births. So I birthed all of my babies at home, which was my preference. Beautiful birth. She was perfectly healthy, had all the checks and everything after she was born. In fact, if you have a home birth in the UK, very often you get a little bit more attention because, doctors have to come out to you. They have to send a doctor out to check afterwards, and you have your midwife team that are working with you. So there was never any question of her being anything other than healthy. It was literally a question of 1 minute she was perfectly fine, sitting on my lap, laughing. I was eating. I was playing with her while I was eating in a cafe. And within hours, I'd got her home. I'd put her in her sort of baby car seat to put in the car. Got home and thought she'd gone to sleep, and she wasn't. She was asleep, but she was also unconscious and unresponsive. And within 24 hours, she'd gone. So it was part of the bereavement process. Thank you for. My husband and I was really an immense shock. It was blindsided us. It does anyway, right? You know that.
Well, as working with helping parents heal, I talk with parents that go through all different types of situations, and we always, kind of debate which is better or which is worse.
Right?
If you know it's coming, or if it's sudden, like it was in your case and in my case, where my daughter was perfectly healthy and just didn't wake up one day.
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
But,
it's how long is a piece of string, right? I think it's shattering no matter what way. You're just not expecting it, whatever, right? Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, thank goodness I haven't been in this situation personally, but I can imagine that even if you are told your child has an illness and they're not going to make it, I can still imagine your brain going into some kind of denial because you just don't want to accept that as a reality, right?
As a parent, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. As a parent, every fiber of your being is programmed to want to protect and keep your child alive. And I think that comes into the shock. I went into quite a profound state of shock after Romy died, to the point that actually even when I was writing The Truth Inside, there were certain aspects of the sort of journey, the experience that I really couldn't recall. And I was frustrated I couldn't recall it, and I thought it was PTSD. But it's related. But it was shock. I can't recall them. My brain obviously doesn't want to go there, and I had to kind of rely on family members and to sort of piece together, and neighbours who'd been there when she was taken ill, and just to kind of help me to piece together exactly how events had unfolded. And I clearly remember being at the PICU with her. We were taken to our local hospital here in Brighton in the UK, and they were phenomenal, but they quickly identified that it was some kind of neurological issue that they couldn't pinpoint. So they blue lighted us in an ambulance down to London, which is around an hour and a half. And I still can't hear ambulance sirens to this day without having some kind of reaction. Hour and a half listening to a siren is quite intense. And I can still remember walking into the PICU, and there was Romy on one sort of bed, but the whole room was filled with parents sitting by the bedsides of children who were clearly very, very unwell. And I'm guessing a lot of them had different illnesses. They'd been in there for some time. And I can still remember, after Romy had died, which was like a day later, turning to my husband and saying, well, at least we're not going through what they're going through. What an extraordinary thing to even think at that point. But I remember my heart for those parents. I just thought, my goodness, how do they find the strength to sit next to their child who is in pain or dying? That's something that nobody ever wants to get their head around, right?
Yeah. I can definitely relate to everything you're saying.
I'm sure you can. Yeah.
So after she passed, well, you're in this state of shock. And what were your spiritual beliefs like at that time? What was your spiritual life? What did you think happened to Romy?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey there, something I want to tell you about today. My podcast platform, Buzzsprout, has recently made it easier for me to allow you to support me financially. Go to www.grieftogrowth.com/subscribe. That's grief2growth.com/subscribe. And once you're there, you can sign up to support me financially. Now, you can do it for as little as $3 a month, or of course, as much as you'd like. If you do that, you'll get access to bonus episodes, and you'll see those in the regular feed. They'll have a lock on them. But when you become a subscriber, you'll actually get access to your own private feed, and you'll be able to listen to the regular podcast along with the bonus podcast for the subscribers. I want to thank you for listening. I want to thank you for sharing the podcast. And I want to thank those of you who support me financially. Have a great day, and on to the episode.
Well, I guess from a very young age, I'd been very interested in what I would term spiritualism. Mm-hmm. My family are not religious, conventionally religious, and they're very open-minded. So as a child, we would have lots of discussions about life after death. And my mother's quite psychic. She doesn't really like to go there at all, but she's had experiences that she was happy to share with us as a family. Mm-hmm. And we used to talk about those. And I kind of instantly took it on, and I'd had my own experiences. When I was a very small child, I remember having conversations with my grandfather who'd passed when I was 4, which I always thought were dreams in some way, until I had one particular dream when I was 14 that was very convincing, and in which he sort of talked to me and gave me information about things that had happened to my father recently, who was his son. And when I actually told my parents about this, we sort of started to realize that actually maybe that wasn't a dream. Something really odd has happened here. So I was obviously picking up on things as a child, and I'd held those beliefs all the way through my adult life. So all through my 20s and into my 30s, I sat in psychic development circles. I developed mediumship skills. I never wanted to work with it. I didn't really know why I was doing it. I didn't ever have any aspirations to work as a medium or a psychic. I would never judge anyone who works in that area professionally. For me personally, I couldn't sit with the idea of taking money for that kind of service. I felt that it was something that if you have that ability and you choose to develop it, I wanted to just be able to give of that. Mm-hmm. So I just developed it for my own interest. I wanted to learn. And at the point at which I had Romy, I mean, I've written in The Truth Inside about what happened just previously. We were having my husband and I, these kind of agonizing discussions over whether or not to have this baby, and me saying, look, there's somebody there. And I'd read a book also called Spirit Babies by a clairvoyant, I believe he was American or Canadian, called Walter Makaishin. Mm-hmm. And it's a wonderful book. This man was a spiritual medium who claimed to be able to see the possible children of a woman or couple within their aura. And it's a collection of very interesting and thought-provoking case studies. Mm-hmm. And I'd read this, and I clearly believed that conscious conception, which is a not conscious uncoupling, I have to just make that distinction clear, conscious conception was a term that this man coined. And the idea that there are children willing to join your family, and that if you ask them to join you, they will join you. I was kind of exploring that idea, and in my heart I believe that something like that happened
Wow.
Romy,
Wow.
I believe. I
Yeah.
sort of said, look, I know you're supposed to be here. And I felt like I kind of made a bit of a bargain with what I would call the spirit world, in that I kind of said, look, send me this child and I'll do your work. It terrifies me to get up on stage and do demonstrations of mediumship, but I will pass on the message you want me to pass on. I will do whatever you want me to do, but just bring me this child, because I have to have this child here. So I'd say that belief was pretty much alive and well. I think during my period of shock and that intense initial bereavement, I do recall that, thanks to the kindness of the community we were living in at the time, who cooked our food. I didn't cook for a month. They were extraordinary. I'd never experienced anything like that. Strangers were just leaving dinner on our doorstep. And that gave my husband and I some really valuable moments when our other children were in bed, to sort of sit in the evenings and talk, however painful it was. And one of the things we talked about was like, why has this happened? Where is she? What's happened to her? Why us? And we went through all the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's tenets of grief. Hilariously, I kind of thought I sidestepped anger. I really hadn't. In my own mind, I'm not angry about this at all. I was very angry, and I didn't want answers in the way that I expected to want answers. So what I mean by that is I wasn't gripped by the idea that I had to immediately call the hospital and ask them why they hadn't saved her, what actually was wrong with her, and why didn't they do X, Y, and Z? Why didn't we have more tests? I was quite at peace with that, because somewhere in me I felt like, you know what, she just was meant. This is how it was meant to happen, and I can't change it. But my husband has an interest in Buddhist philosophy, and so we had lots of conversations in that time about all the questions. And I think the clearest conclusion that we came to was that we were meant to learn something from the experience. And we said, you know what, we need to try and frame this for ourselves, that instead of getting sucked into our grief and never coming out, as we'd already seen other people in that situation experiencing, we thought, no, we want to climb out of this, and we want to find a way to live our lives with purpose. We owe that much to our children. They didn't ask for any of this, and we wanted very much to try and apply some of our spiritual beliefs to the situation, and think, well, in fact, as I said, I did say to my husband once, look, why us? And he said, well, why not?
Now, was there a time when you lost your spiritual belief after she had passed?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't want to. I always say this when I talk about the truth inside. I really don't want anyone to think that because I had a certain set of spiritual beliefs, or because I've trained as a medium and I've had those experiences, that I kind of sailed through bereavement and it was all, I was accepting of everything. No, I really, as I said, I was very angry, but not really acknowledging of that to start with. And I lost all of it. I really turned my back on all of it. I can't remember what period that was, probably a couple of months afterwards, when you've, first of all, I think my husband and I kind of clung to each other, and the community was supporting us. And then obviously everyone goes back to their daily lives, right?
Yeah.
And then you get that strange interim period where nobody really knows what to say to you, or how to ask you how you're feeling, or because they feel like, well, it's been a few months, now what do I say? Is it going to kind of trigger her? Or so we're in that kind of weird no man's land. And in that time, I think that's when I really got to know my anger, and decided the whole spiritualist thing was a complete joke. I didn't want anything to do with it. In fact, the thing that fueled my anger the most, actually, one of them was something that I always imagine that somebody who reads my book might be asking themselves. They might, I was asking myself, what, if I'm a medium and I have these abilities and I've had them my whole life, how on earth did I not know that this was going to happen to me? I was angry. Like, I should have known.
There's this myth that mediums are all knowing.
Yes.
And it's interesting because you mentioned that you did not have a premonition, and some parents do and some parents don't. I just interviewed a woman last week who's a medium, and she actually knew that her daughter was going to leave.
Right.
Some mothers seem to get, it seems, especially mothers seem to get that, and some of us don't, and we don't know why.
Yeah. That is a really interesting phenomena, I think. My aunt, in a strange parallel, my aunt, she lost her daughter, at exactly the same age, almost to the day, actually, as Romy was. I was 6 years old at the time. Her baby was my cousin. Nicola was her name. And she had a very similar experience. And she was the first person that I wanted to call when I came home from the hospital. And the first thing she said to me was, I know what you want to ask me. We were on the phone at the time. She said, I know what you want to ask me. You want to ask me if I knew, and I did. And it was strange because after the event, I felt as if I had that knowing. Does that make sense? I called my best friend from the hospital. I think it was the small hours of the morning. And I was obviously in a really distressed state. And I don't remember half of the conversation that we had, but she said to me that apparently I was saying to her over and over, I knew this was going to happen. And I don't remember thinking that. I don't remember feeling it. And I don't remember saying that to her, but she is insistent.
Wow.
Because it really shocked her, because she was kind of thinking, well, why didn't you say so? So I obviously had some kind of knowing on some level, but not necessarily a conscious one.
Yeah, I was going to say that maybe on a different level, on a soul level, as we might say, or higher self level, that you had some sort of knowing, and you had this insistence you were going to bring Romy in, and you felt like there was some purpose, but maybe I think sometimes maybe we block,
Sure,
we don't want to accept with the thing that we might kind of know at a different level.
Absolutely. And I always saw my grief, once I kind of climbed out of the really bad whole part, I think I started to view my grief as having a very distinct duality. So I remember saying to my husband, look, on a spiritual level, I totally get it, and I can almost accept it. I know it. I know we had a contract. I know the three of us were complicit in some idea that we would bring her here, she would complete what she needed to complete, and she would leave. And that would raise us all up in some way that I don't understand. But on a human level, I can't cope, and I'm angry, and I can't, Eckhart Tolle writes about this quite extensively, actually, and he has some really interesting theories on that. But he also recognizes this duality of grief, particularly when one's lost a child, of that kind of, I can be very accepting of this. Death is sacred and it's a transition, and I can understand because this is my child, and I can understand what their purpose was, and isn't that wonderful that I help them to achieve that? But as a mother or a father, it's devastating. It's awful on a human level. It's almost unbearable, I would say.
I think that duality is really important to keep in mind, even as spiritualists, with the small s, people who believe in spirit, because we are human, and a lot of times people think if you have these abilities like you do, we can bypass this, or
right.
And there's no bypassing. And I've talked to people who are mediums that, I can think of one. She's a famous medium. Her mother passed away. They were extremely close. She didn't hear from her mother for a year,
Right.
So it's not like we get to, people that get to just, move to the next level or something.
That's right. And you can't call them up on a phone. And,
right.
If you're a medium and you do, you perform the service of doing sittings for clients, one of the toughest things to try to explain to somebody who walks through your door for a sitting is that you're here, you need to be open, and you really need to accept what comes through. You can't walk through a door to a medium, and I've done this myself, I admit, thinking, right, I just need to speak to my grandmother, could you just get her, please? It's not like that. I don't know how things are organized wherever they all are, but I always have the impression that sometimes there's a lot of spirits or a lot of energies wanting to communicate or to come through, and it's literally like form a queue, and sometimes that's not actually what you need to hear at that point in your life. Otherwise, I think a lot of people would misuse it, and I think the temptation for those of us who the temptation would still be there for those of us who don't believe in abusing that connection. I think there would be a huge temptation, right? I mean, it would be, well, when am I going to die? What, am I going to get the house that I want to buy? What, I don't like my job. What's going to happen? And then it would take away our impetus to want to be productive and creative in our lives. And that is not a good thing, because we don't learn otherwise. So
there's some part about being human that needs that forgetfulness, that unknowing, the unfolding of the future, however it's going to be. There's and I haven't figured that out yet, but there's something about us that seems to require that. So
Yeah, I guess.
after Romy, and I rarely use the word died, you might notice, after she made her transition, what were some of the first experiences you started having? When did this start happening? What were they like?
Well, the first one that I recall was unusual for me because it doesn't often happen. So when I work with spirit, I would describe my abilities as mainly clairvoyant. So I see. By that I mean I see sort of. It's almost as if there's a movie screen behind my forehead. If I close my eyes, I see things in picture form there. But I rarely have I actually seen as if something is in front of me, like I'm seeing you now, for example. And the first instance I recall was unusual for precisely that reason. I saw her, and I didn't just see her once. It was on 3 consecutive nights. So obviously, because she was a small baby, let's just contextualize. My husband and I, we've always co-slept with our kids. And with Romy in particular, I wouldn't even put her down to sleep in a different room. I would put my other kids to bed, and then, I would feed her, and she would lie on the sofa next to us, or one of us would be wearing her in a sling or holding her. She was constantly on one of us, which actually now that gives me a lot of comfort. To know that I really enjoyed every single second that I could with her is very important. And so we had this routine. When finally we kind of went up to bed, we would carry her upstairs with us. And then just so we didn't want to leave her, she was so little, we didn't want to leave her just lying on our bed on her own. So I would usually go into the bathroom to clean my teeth or whatever, and my husband would sit in the bedroom with her, and then we would swap over. So I think it was about 4 or 5 nights after she'd passed, I was going up the stairs to go to bed, and I just glanced across to our bedroom door, and I saw her in our bed, exactly as she would have been. And at that point, I actually didn't quite believe what I was seeing. And I think even I probably thought, okay, I'm really in a bad state emotionally here. My mind is playing tricks on me. I think it's important to underline as well that although I've done lots of work developing my mediumship skills, and I'm, quote, a believer, I believe in a healthy level of skepticism. So I will always question what I think I've seen or got, just because I think that's healthy. I think it's you can create difficulties for yourself if you're just blindly grabbing onto every sign or every little thing that you experience. So I kind of brushed that off, and then it happened a second night, and then it happened a third night. And on the third night, the image was there for a little longer. And actually at that point I got really upset about it, and I just said out loud, no, can you stop? I can't see this. Please stop. Don't do it. I can't, it's too much. And I never saw it again. So I don't know. Again, was it my subconscious? Was it my grief? I don't know. But I can say with all honesty that I believe that I saw her in my bed. And that happened a couple of other times around my home. On one occasion, I was listening to a piece of music, and I was very emotional about this piece of music. And I was thinking about her, and I turned round, and we used to have one of those little bouncy baby chairs for her. And she used to have it in a certain spot next to where my husband would work. He would work at home sometimes. And I just turned round because I felt this presence in the room. I can't describe it. It was like there was a huge presence in the room, not just a person walking in, and I was alone in the house. So I turned round and I saw her in her chair for a few seconds. I was sort of dumbstruck, and then I looked away for a second, looked back, and she had gone. So those were the first ones. And then we had I think the one that really cemented things for me and brought me back to my beliefs was something that was told to me by a medium. I had found myself at a sort of psychic event that I hadn't had any intention of going to. I'd just seen an advertisement for it and completely impulsively said, I said to my husband, could have the kids, I'm going to this. I mean, that's how impulsive I felt about it. And on the way there, I was like, well, I don't know what I'm doing this. I'm done with all this. In the end, I thought, okay, fine, I'll go and buy a crystal and then I'll come home. It's an hour's break out of the house. And I spoke to this woman who was a psychic medium, and she knew nothing about me, started to talk about a young baby who'd recently transitioned to the spirit world. described her passing in a lot of detail, described other members of my family who were in spirit. She was exceptional. And out of the blue, she suddenly said to me, have you seen your TV move in your house? And I just said, well, no, I haven't. And she said, no, I think you have. So at this point, I'm like, no, I haven't watched my TV moving around the house. I couldn't understand what she meant.
Mm-hmm.
And then like a flash, I thought, hang on a minute. I think the week previously, I had come downstairs, and again, it was something like 3 or 4 consecutive mornings. I'd come down the stairs in my home, and our TV at that time was one of those ones that's on a stand, and it can sort of swivel through like 180 degrees, so that if you have it on a stand in your home, you can move it. And we had it in the same position all the time, because we had quite a small living room, and the only place that we could sit and watch the TV was in this swung couch. So we never had occasion to move it. We never swung it around. I'd never seen it do that. But I'd come down 3 mornings in a row, and it had been really turned completely 180 degrees. It was facing our kitchen.
Oh, wow.
And the first thing I thought was, oh my gosh, my husband has come down. He gets the blame for everything.
Yeah.
He's come down. He's come down and tried to plug his phone charger in behind this stand, and he's knocked the TV, and he hasn't even turned it back again. I was really annoyed with him. Forgot to say anything. The next day, the same thing. Maybe a couple of days passed, and another day, the same thing. And again, it's one of those things that just had happened in the morning. I'd sort of, in a temper, pushed it back again and then not said anything. And here's this woman saying to me, your TV's been moving. And I said, well, actually, I haven't seen it move, but yeah, I guess I can take that. And she said, no, that is your daughter letting you know that she's present in your house. And she said, it hasn't just happened once, has it? It's happened, 3 or 4 times. And I thought, well,
wow.
Actually, yes, it has. So at home later, I was telling my husband what had happened during this reading, and I just didn't tell him about the TV. I couldn't bring myself to say the words. He's very open-minded, but I just thought, I can't. This is ridiculous. I think because part of me wanted to believe it, and I thought if he turns around and says, no, it's me plugging in my phone charger, I'm going to be crushed.
Yeah.
But eventually I did say to him, look, there was something else that she said, which was a bit weird. She said something about the TV moving. So before I said anything else, he turned to me and he said, well, that's weird, because I've noticed it's been doing that, but I thought it was you. So we sort of looked at each other and were like, okay. So then we went through, okay, what are the chances that one of the kids has got up and calmed down, and they've pushed it?
Yeah. Of
course. They were very little, then they were 4 and 5. They couldn't actually reach where the TV was. And so we're then like, okay, now we've got a situation where maybe our 5-year-old has come downstairs without waking us up, got a piece of furniture, stood on it and pushed the TV around. But why would he be doing that? So, but we still thought, well, it's possible. So we were concocting all these ideas. Okay, like how could we try and ask them or set it up? And we never had to, because actually after we'd had that conversation, it never happened again. And that's happened with a few of the experiences we've had. It's like once we acknowledge it, it stops happening. So I then asked myself, well, I don't know if any of the other explanations were the correct explanation. Why has it stopped? But yeah, that was it. That to me, that was extraordinary.
I think even that in itself is kind of a sign, right? These things happen. We all do that, and I think that's human nature. We're not going to first jump to there's a spirit in my house moving things around. What's the natural thing that could be happening? Is it my husband? Is it one of my kids? And then it's interesting because my daughter used to turn our lights on in the bedroom. We have a ceiling fan. And it's operated by remote, and we'd go up and it'd be on and the fan would be turning. And now that I think about it, it hasn't happened in quite a while.
Right.
But it was happening like on a nightly basis. We go upstairs and it's like the lights on in the bedroom. Nobody was up there. There's no other explanation. So these things do seem to kind of happen.
Yeah. But our human brain goes into, oh, well, there's got to be an explanation. My sister had a similar experience recently, and I would say she's of a far more skeptical persuasion than I am. My brother-in-law, her husband, endured a very difficult loss with his own brother a few years ago, and they had a very random occurrence where lots of things were turning themselves on in the house. And eventually, still, she called me and my parents had mentioned it, and she eventually mentioned it, and I said, you know what, I think it's him. And she said, oh, we'd never thought of that. And then it stopped happening. It's, so I don't know. I think there's something in it. I really do. Otherwise, I can't explain why things stop happening once you then, you
Yeah.
accept them as being a sign or a message from a loved one in spirit. I can't understand. Yeah, I can't connect those things.
So besides the TV movie, you've had other connections with Romy as well, right? You've had some extra communication with her? Is that correct?
Yes, in a sense. So through mediums, and also, again, something that at first I thought was a dream, but it really wasn't. I've had a handful of occasions in my life where I've had an experience,
Mm-hmm.
I guess, for want of a better description, while asleep. And then when I've woken up, I thought, no, that was something really profound. And I had an experience, must have been some months. So she passed in July. I think this would have been around November of the same year.
Mm-hmm.
And I was asleep, and I remember having this dream where I felt that I was underwater. It was really strong sensation. I don't have any fear of water or anything. That wasn't significant in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're a kid sometimes, and you lie in the bath with your ears under the water, and then somebody's talking to you, and you can kind of hear their voice, and it's muffled.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is what I was under the water, and I could hear a voice talking to me, but I couldn't make it out because they were above the water level. And I was really straining to hear. And then I started to tune in, and I realized it was my own voice. So that felt quite weird. Thinking,
Mm-hmm.
well, this is this is my dream. What am I doing? Talking to myself under the
Mm-hmm.
water. And then I started to listen, and I was catching the odd word. And what I thought I was hearing were the words that I was saying to Romy as she passed.
Mm-hmm.
My husband and I were very privileged. I think it was a privilege it was just the three of us. It could have been very different. I feel truly privileged that we were able to hold our daughter as she passed from this world into the next. And at that point, I do remember having a thought, and I've written about this in The Truth Inside. There's a certain chapter when I describe this, but I remember thinking to myself, I can fall apart afterwards, but at this moment in time, my daughter needs me. I need her. I need to help her do this. I don't know what to do, but I'm going to do whatever I think I'm supposed to be doing to help her. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was saying things to her like, look, they're all waiting for you. You just have to go to the light. I don't know why, or I don't know. I'd never been in that situation before or since, thankfully. And I was just saying, go to the light, see all the souls there that love you. We love you very much, but it's time for you to go home. And I could hear my voice saying these words in this dream. And just as I recognized that I had this bizarre sensation, and it was a physical sensation. I would say at that point that I wouldn't have said I was deeply asleep. It almost felt like I was awake and I was experiencing this. It felt as if some energy had just pulled me upwards. It's like I sort of shot into the air, and it was really exhilarating. I think at the time I likened it to the things you do as a child, like standing on a high diving board, kind of like daring yourself to jump off into the swimming pool. It was that feeling of like, oh my gosh, can I do it? Can I do it? And then suddenly, whoosh, I went. And it was, and I remember having one thought as I sort of felt myself going upwards. I remember thinking, oh my goodness, this is so simple. I know everything. Everything is fine. I had this real sense of knowing, or just reassurance of just feeling like everything is exactly as it's supposed to be. All my fear went. I think that's what it was. It's a very difficult thing to explain on a human level, because I don't think any of us are ever quite without any level of fear, anxiety, questioning. None of that was there. It was completely calm.
Yeah.
And just at that moment, our older daughter, who was asleep in the next room, woke up and called for me. So I sort of leapt out of bed like you do, right? And sort of rushed off to her, settled her down. And then I came back to bed, and I just stood there for a moment thinking, my gosh, what have I just experienced? And I woke my husband up, and I said, I think I said something like, I've just had this bizarre experience. It wasn't a dream, but I dreamt about Romy, and she was showing me what it was like when she passed. That's what I believe I had experienced. And the reason I think I experienced that at that point was that at that particular point in my grief, I had become a little bit fixated on whether she'd been okay at the time of her passing. I was
Mm-hmm.
worried about, was she scared or in pain? You know, what else could I have done? I was feeling like I'd let her down. I hadn't done enough to help her.
Yeah.
So I really believe that I was given the privilege of being shown a little snapshot. It's like she was allowed to give me that to reassure me,
Wow.
which it did. You know, it really
Yeah.
did.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hi there, I'm really excited to tell you about my latest ebook. It's 4 lessons that you can learn from the near-death experience without going through all the trouble of dying to learn them. I've been studying NDEs for several years now. I am completely convinced that not only are they 100% real, but that there's some very universal wisdom that we can get from the near-death experience. And I've distilled that down in this book into 4 short lessons. And I've also given you all the reasons why I believe that NDEs are absolutely real. So go to www.grieftogrowth.com/NDE lessons to pick it up for free. www.growth.com/NDE lessons. I hope you enjoy it. Wow. So have you communicated with Romy through other mediums?
Yes. So I think I've never been one. I try to keep the practice of not seeking out mediums or sittings with mediums. And I know that it's very easy to get sucked into a trap where you're going regularly. So I would try and say, okay, once or twice a year.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I go, and I go now, I try and go with a completely open mind to see what comes up. And I'm not usually disappointed. And in fact, the last couple of times I've been, I don't think I've had any communication with Romy. And that's also something that I always feel that I knew. In the first year or two, I probably had sittings with 3 or 4, maybe 5 different mediums, all of which I've written about in The Truth Inside. And I remember coming to the end of the last of those sittings and thinking, I've got a feeling I'm not going to hear from her for a while. I just feel like I've got what I needed and she needs to go and do something. You know,
Yeah.
She can't be constantly. But yeah, I had 2 or 3, maybe 4 sittings with different reasons. I mean, I used to go to my local spiritualist church.
Mm-hmm.
I sort of got back into doing that. And again, another layer really, because in that case, I was sitting in an audience of people, sometimes 100, 200 people. And on several occasions, a medium picked me out. One gentleman picked me out and started describing Romy and speaking about a particular piece of jewelry that was very special. And this was during the winter time. So and I'm really savvy about this kind of thing. I'll go to a spiritualist church and I'll be like, okay, have I got any jewelry on show? Wear a scarf. Not because I want to be mean, but because I want to make sure that if I receive any information, I can feel confident that it's genuine.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be mistrustful, but at the same time, I don't want to be overly open. And this gentleman was go to great lengths to describe this piece of jewelry. And I was wearing, I have a locket that my husband bought me. It's a big locket that has her picture in and a lock of her hair. And he described it all perfectly. So, you know, there were little things like that.
Mm-hmm.
There was another medium, actually, I saw at a spiritualist church. This was in the early days when I started first going back, after I told my husband I was never, ever setting foot in one again. That was during my angry phase.
Yeah.
And then again, randomly one evening just said, I think I'll just go to the spiritualist church. So I again found myself driving there alone, thinking to myself, like, what on earth am I doing? You know, I don't want to do this. Why am I going here?
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, I was talking out loud to Romy in the car. And I remember I said to her, look, I know that you're okay. I know in my heart that you're okay. But, you know, I'm still your mummy. And I need to hear it from you. That's the words that I said to her. I said, I just need to hear you telling me that you're okay. That's all I need. And then I'm going to have a little bit more peace. And I got there, I parked my car, I went in. It was a huge audience that night. It was a medium who worked in a very particular way. She explained that, she said, look, I talk very fast. I get a lot of information very quickly. I'll probably come to a lot more of you than you're used to. And if I come to you, don't be fazed if I just kind of like barking information at you. So as she was explaining that, I remember thinking, I know she's going to come to me and I'm going to be the third person. I know it. And I was. And she gave me a very brief message, described a member of my family in spirit. And then suddenly like that was talking about, okay, there's a young baby, it's a little girl, she's passed quite recently. And I'm thinking, yeah, okay, great. And then she said, okay, I'm going to need to move on. But actually they're telling me that I need to tell you a piece of information, and it's really, really important, and I have to get the words exactly right. So I kind of thought, okay. I was sitting there waiting for her to give me some sort of amazing piece of wisdom from spirit. And she said, okay, I'm being told that I have to tell you these precise words, and the words are, I'm okay. And that probably of all the things I experienced, I think that was the most meaningful. It took me many weeks going over and over that in my head for it to sink in. That to me, that was extraordinary, really extraordinary. The choice of words, everything. I mean,
well, as a parent, I think that's like the number one thing we want to know about our kids,
of
is
course,
that they're okay. We want to know, or that are they being taken care of. And I can only imagine. My daughter was 15 when she passed, and it was still, she was still my responsibility and to take care of her. But when it's a baby, an infant, as a mother, you've got to be like, who's going to take care of her? What's going to happen? Is she okay? That's the number one question.
Yes, exactly. So I think on so many levels, I mean, the fact that I felt that, and again, it's one of the situations I used to talk to her when I drove around with her in the back of the car in the car seat. And so I sort of just continued doing that. But, I felt pretty silly doing it. I thought, well, okay, I'm just indulging myself here, and it's really ridiculous. So actually to have that acknowledgement of like, my God, she can actually hear what I'm saying to her. That was a real, even with everything that I'd studied and learned over the years and all the beliefs that I have, that was really still a big one for me. That was really, and I find it very emotional now, actually, just to think, every week when I sit down, I write full time now. It's my, that's my work. When I sit down at my desk to write, I have her photograph here, but I put fresh flowers for her every week on my desk, and I talk to her when I put the flowers there. And it feels so meaningful to me. And I'm sure you have similar things that you do for your daughter, to have a feeling that actually somewhere on some level she can hear me, she can feel my love. That means everything, right? Because
absolutely. And that's what I want to encourage people that might be kind of new to the show or to this whole concept, is that you can keep that relationship. It's a different relationship, but you can maintain that. And I think it's very important. And those little confirmations from mediums that tell you, okay, she knows, she heard you talking to her. She, and those little things that they'll say, people like they want to know, like, how did the person die, or what did they look like, and all those are interesting pieces of evidence. But when they tell you, like my daughter came to a meeting once and said that my wife had this rainbow colored cake the day before or recently, and I didn't even know it. And so my wife gets home, and I tell her about the reading. She goes, yeah, yesterday at work, we had this rainbow colored cake.
Wow.
So just that little thing that says Shayna is she's still here. Not only does she remember and everything you did was okay, but she's still part of our lives. Those are the things that really stick with you.
Yeah, I totally agree. Of all the things that you could want to hear, yes, it would be lovely to hear about what's it like where she is. Is she growing up there? Who's taking care of her? But actually, of course, you want to hear she's okay, and she's looking in on us every now and again, and she knows what's going on in our lives. My daughter, my other daughter, Layla, she's 9 now, but she was 4 when her sister passed. And I've always thought she had whatever abilities that I've kind of had since I was a child. I think my daughter has the same. And she doesn't share them particularly willingly. And now she's got older, so I think a lot of them she's forgotten. But I remember at that time, she came out with some very profound things from time to time that had me thinking, are you seeing her? Are you, are you having some kind of communication? She didn't really know what she was telling me, but she said some, I felt like that connection was there.
Yeah, you had mentioned when I was asking some questions I could ask you beforehand. You mentioned that she said something eerie about Romy. What was that? Do you remember what that was?
Oh yes. So that was must have been around June. Romy passed in July, and I clearly remember it was I was trying to bath all 3 kids, So they were like, they're like 5, 4, and a relatively new baby.
Right.
We're all in the bathroom together. The older two are in the tub, messing about. I'm trying to breastfeed the baby. It's just chaos is quite normal in our house even now. And I remember we were having this. I was trying to instill some order by talking about what we were going to do in the school summer holidays. So in the UK, we have a 6-week summer holiday, and it usually starts around the end of July until the end of August, beginning of September. And so we started this little tradition in our family where, just for fun, we would make a huge list of all the things that the kids want to do in the summer holiday. And then in order to manage expectations, we'd say, okay, we're obviously not going to do everything on the list, but each week we're going to pick one person's suggestion in turn. The idea being then that, you know what it's like, right? You don't want to spend a fortune. These things are so expensive, days out, whatever. So we'd have a day out every week. And it could be a paid for day out or a free one. It doesn't matter. But the fact was everyone felt like they'd had a choice, and it made it fun for everyone. So we were talking about the list for the summer holiday. And my older son said, could we go to the open air swimming pool? We'd been there the year before, and I don't quite know what the climate's like in your part of the US, but you and probably most of your listeners will know that in the UK we're not blessed with very hot weather in the summer.
Right.
It's really exciting if we get sun, and so we'd been the previous summer, it had been really hot, and we'd gone to this open air outdoor swimming pool, and they're rare to find in the UK, and we have one near us. So I'd said, well, we can go, but this year we have to ask Auntie Claire to come with us, because we've got Romy now, and I can't take all 3 of you on your own, because you're all 5 years old and under, and you can't swim, and so I need another adult with me. So we were discussing that, and then my daughter Layla, who hadn't said anything, just said, well, Mummy, after Romy goes back, will we be able to go to the swimming pool with you again, just on our own? So I kind of when she said that, I did stop for a moment and think, oh my goodness, like what? And I said, but I tried to sort of arrange my face into a calm.
Sure. Yeah.
Sorry, what did you say? And she said, well, when Romy goes back. So I said, well, where, what do you mean? Where do you think she's going to go? And she said, well, she's going back, Mummy. And she said it really like that,
Wow.
well, she's going back. Like, what are you doing? So I looked at her, our eyes met for a minute. She was only 4. And everything was racing through my mind. I didn't initially think, oh my God, it's a portent of doom. I was actually thinking, to be honest, okay, there's a little bit of sibling envy going on.
Yeah.
My daughter was the baby, then she wasn't.
Yeah. It
was another girl. I thought, okay, maybe this is what this is about. So I'm trying to figure out how to, there was a tiny part of my brain that thought, oh, what we know, I don't like how that sounds. That's not very nice. So I just said, Layla, where do you think she's going to go? And she gave me this look that look that young children give you when they know they've said something they shouldn't have said, like when they've lied to you, or they've made, she sort of looked at me and then said, well, is she going back in your tummy? And I sort of relaxed, and I said, no, just like you and Casper, she's here now. So I went through all of that, but that came back to me very quickly after she passed. In fact, when I had to tell my children, I remember Layla said pretty much nothing. And I do remember thinking, oh my goodness, she knew. And I'm sure she knew. She knew. She had some kind of understanding.
Yeah.
That I didn't appreciate at the time.
Well, kids, our girls said some things like they would talk about being together before they came here, and saying things like they chose us to be their parents. And they were 3 years apart. So this was like when they were probably like 4 and 7 or 3 and 6, somewhere in that range. And like you said, like kids that just say it so innocently and so matter of factly. And we didn't have any of these beliefs. We'd never thought about this. We were pretty traditional Christians, I guess, at the time, and never talked about pre-existence. And they would just say it like matter of factly. Yeah, when we were heaven before we came here, stuff like that. So yeah, in your family, it seems that runs in your family. It sounds like anyway. So
I think so. I mean, I would say possibly both of my grandmothers had some kind of ability. My mother certainly does, but as I said, she really, really doesn't want to go there. And yeah, I'm sure my daughter does. And we had a conversation about it once. She went through a phase where she couldn't sleep alone, or she didn't want to. We sort of did that thing as parents. No, come on, go back to your own bed. You've got to do this. You're 5 now, and she would routinely wake in the middle of the night. We'd had night lights on, fairy lights, and a whole arsenal of lighting around the house, stories, sprays, all sorts of things, lots of reassuring talks. And yet still she would wake up probably 4 or 5 nights out of 7, scared, and coming to find us. And so obviously she'd end up in our bed, and that was fine. But it got to a point where one night, I don't know why it didn't occur to me before, but I sat down with her and I said, why is it that you think that you're waking up in the night? And I think she was maybe 5 or 6 at this point. And I said, why do you think it is that you're waking up all the time in the night? And without missing a beat, she just said, well, because people are talking to me. So I said, well, okay, well, what people? And she said, well, I don't know, Mummy. I just, I'm asleep. And then suddenly these people are talking to me. And I said, well, what are they saying? And she said, she said something like, they're asking me things and then they're telling me things they want me to tell other people. So I just said, okay. And I said, well, look, that happens to me sometimes, and it happens to Nana, and she said, well, is that normal? And I said, well, there is no normal, but it happens to lots of people, and some people think it's fine and other people would rather not. And I said, what I think you should do is the next time they talk to you, just in your head or out loud, just say really nicely, I'm only 6 or I'm only 5 and I need to get some sleep. So if you've got something to say, could you please go and say it to my mum? I said, just tell them. They can say anything to me. I'm happy to listen. So she said, oh, okay. And never got up in the night again. Never. Wow. Never had night terrors again after that. So again, it's either a very maybe I've invented a really clever technique for helping kids with night terrors. But again, I think she had some kind of connection with spirit going on. And
well, I've heard that before from people who are natural mediums that people will come into their bedroom at night, and I don't know. Sometimes it seems like the spirit people are rude. They should know little kids need to go to sleep. I don't understand that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Ali, how did the book come about? So you go through this this process, and what started you writing? I think you credited Romy with getting you back into writing.
Yes, in a strange sense. A blog came first, actually. I started a blog. Well, my lovely sister-in-law, Norell, she's really great with technology, and I'm not. And in the early days, when we were planning Romy's memorial service, we wanted to put everything on a website. So we lived in a small village, but we have quite a large circle of friends, and that the whole community were so supportive. We wanted to invite everybody to the memorial service, but we didn't want to keep repeating all the information. So she said, look, I'll set up a website. Just tell a few friends that there's a website and they can email everybody.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we did, so we did that. And I didn't really register at the time, but the template that she used had a sort of a blog tab on it, and she just put it in and didn't really tell me. I guess I wasn't in the right place to hear it either. But a few weeks afterwards, I remember sort of saying to her, what's this, why is this, what is this thing for a blog? Like, how do you do that? And so she taught me through it, and I thought, okay, I'm going to just, at this point, it's just had this sort of website. And I thought, well, I'm going to write a little bit about what I'm experiencing at the moment, because I was finding, as I'm sure you and your wife have had this experience, as I say, in that sort of after the initial period, I was finding things very difficult, and it was mainly because of other people's reactions. It wasn't their fault, but people were quite inept on the whole at knowing how to approach me. And I actually wanted to be approached.
Right.
And then when some people would approach, but they'd immediately start telling you about when their father died, or, you're just thinking, oh God, this is all wrong. Like, please just know how to talk to me, or just please know that if you send me a Christmas card with a picture of your kids on, that's going to upset me, but talking about Romy and saying her name is not going to upset me. So I started to write some blog posts to try and give people outside our immediate circle a vague idea of what it was like for me and what would help. And that sort of started to snowball a little bit, and it was never it didn't go viral or anything, but I had some really nice feedback from people quite far removed who'd come across it. And so basically my husband and I went out for a coffee one morning when the kids were in school, and we were just talking, and I was talking to him about the blog and saying how helpful I'd found it to write the blog, and I'd forgotten how much I enjoyed writing. And then I sort of blurted out, because when I was a kid, it was my childhood dream to be a writer. And we've just had our wedding anniversary, actually. 14 years we've been married, we've been together for 16. And he just looked at me and said, really? He's like, well, you've never told me that before. And I said, oh, haven't I? And I thought, oh my gosh, I'd completely forgotten that was my big dream in life, was to write books. That's all I wanted to do. And that lodged in my head. And I can only say that really in the weeks and months that followed, I feel like, I'm going to use the word coincidence, but I don't really believe that there's any such thing. But a series of coincidences occurred, which saw me that November sitting in a Hay House writer's workshop that I didn't even know these things existed. I'd sort of randomly stumbled upon details for this writing workshop online, thought, oh, that's probably something that's in the US. They're a US based company. Googled it. There was one in London. This was a Wednesday. The London workshop was that Saturday. I called my husband, who's like, you have to go. You've got to go to it. So, things just kind of moved from there. I went to this workshop primarily because they invite everyone who attends the workshop to submit a proposal for their book, and then they pick a winner and they publish it. So I'm not ashamed to admit I kind of went into that thinking I'm going to win this. I'm going to win it. It's a sign. I'm supposed to be here. I'm going to, and I didn't win it, obviously, because my book is not published by Hay House. And I was kind of upset for a couple of weeks. And then I thought, well, actually, now I have some chapters of a book and a proposal, and I wouldn't have had those otherwise. We'd had our younger son by that point. So I was, again, breastfeeding a young baby, and I was at home with him all the time. So I thought, okay, well, what if I just kind of try and see if anything can happen with this book? And the other strand of this strange collection of coincidences was I had read a couple of books by an author called Teresa Chung. I'm not sure how well known she is in the US, but here, I mean, she's written something like 37 titles on angels, the afterlife. She's a great author. She pulls together lots of case studies also. And I'd gone to my bookshelf in the weeks after Romy passed, looking for something else. And this book, I'm not joking, a book practically jumped off the shelf and landed on my foot. And I picked it up, and I think it was called, let's have it up here somewhere, it's here. It was called Angel Babies or something like that. And I looked at it, I thought, I don't even remember buying that. I must have bought it. And I hadn't. I just bought it, put it on my shelf. And it happened to be about, children in the afterlife and young children passing to spirit. And I thought, well, how strange. And I read the book, and I did something I have never done before or since. I sent an email to the author, and I said, look, please don't reply. I know you must have thousands of emails, but I've recently lost my daughter, and I just want you to know that I've read your book, and it was a huge help to me. And that's all. I just want you to know that. Well, she did reply to me. And I had a link to my blog on the foot of my email, and she sent me this lovely reply. And in the reply, she also said, look, I've also read your blog, and I think you write really well. And if you ever think about putting anything together in a book, will you please contact me, because I'll help you in any way I can.
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, I don't know how many English people you know, but I don't think it's unfair to say that, you know what, a lot of Brits will say things like that, and they don't really mean it. When they say things like, oh, we must meet up, and they really don't mean it.
Yeah, well, so we're the same way.
Okay. So I kind of thought, yeah, okay, that's very nice of you. And about a year later, I'd started to put some stuff together, and then the Hay House thing came and went, and I just randomly emailed her and I said, look, this has happened, and I've got sort of 3 chapters of a book. You did say to email you. I feel like I'm intruding a little bit, but have you got any advice? And she said, send me the chapters. She then emailed back and she said, okay, contact John Hunt Publishing and tell them I'll endorse you. So I did. And again, they're a hybrid publisher. I was obviously completely unknown. What I expected them to do was to offer me a hybrid deal, which is in the industry where it's kind of like part self-published, part traditionally published. But they came back to me within weeks and they said, no, we love it. We want to take a chance on you. We're going to give you a traditional publishing deal. So it was like it fell in my lap. The whole thing fell in my lap. And I honestly feel, and then I wrote the book. Max, and our youngest, was months old at the time. I'm not a morning person. I'm not one of those people who gets up at 5 a.m. to knock out 1,000 words before anyone else in the house is up. I'm the last person up in my house. And at that, I write now in the evenings a lot, but then, with a newborn, I was exhausted. And so my only chance was he would nap for an hour and a half to 2 hours after lunch every day. So I would literally put him down on the sofa, sit down and write. And it took me a year, but I wrote the whole book in a year. And I really feel like I was given that book in some way. I can't describe. I read parts of it now and I just think, did I write that? It's an extraordinary feeling. I know it was meant to be out there. And I do feel like in some ways, Romy was, I promised her that I would make sure people knew her name. So I feel there was that part of it. And as a result of that experience of writing the truth inside, I'm just finishing now. I've done a 2-year MA level creative writing course, which is, my dream, just about completing that. And I'm 2/3 of the way through a novel.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I'm, I thank whatever it is up there, spirit. I thank Romy every day, for being in the incredibly privileged position of being able to spend my working time writing. It's where I think I was meant to be, but my life didn't take me down that path earlier on. So I do credit her with that in lots of ways. And it's a bittersweet thing, obviously, because if you said to me right now, well, if you could have her back, of course I would give up anything, but that's obviously not what was meant to happen for me in this lifetime.
Yeah. One of my standard questions I always ask people is, do you believe in soul planning or stuff like that? And I don't think I need to ask that question of you, because as we've been having this conversation, you've been talking about all these threads and the premonitions and the feeling that you needed to bring Romy in. And then so it's really cool to talk to someone and hear the story and see how, the life unfolds. But when you said, you do anything to have her back, it was interesting. I was talking with a client a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about, this is a person whose son has passed away. And, we were doing the standard, I would do anything to have him back. And she goes, and I tell her, I talk about her, I don't give her name, but she said, I wouldn't give anything to have him back. And I said, what? She said, his passing was the best thing that ever happened to him. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. He was a troubled young man, and he was in his 30s or so. But her life has just really taken off since then. And she said, and I have a better relationship with him now than I did when he was here. Because you, she's seen him. And she communicates with them on a daily basis. And I said, well, we'll just keep that between us. We don't want to say that to other people. But I'm like, it's really cool that you got to that point, that where you can see the big picture.
Yeah.
So I want to say to people, if you've lost a child and it's early on, we're not saying this is a great thing that happened to you, that you have to accept this as really cool, but there is some collateral beauty that can come from it. And that's, I think, what you've experienced.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was really beautifully put as well, Brian. I think, there is a danger, obviously, for people who are perhaps currently in that place that you and I have both been in. To hear those words, you can imagine that that could be heard or taken in a negative way. But I think what we're both trying to say here is that, and I hoped also with writing the truth inside, one thing I really wanted to show is look, this is where you can be. You can be standing over here. You can be smiling and laughing and living your life with purpose. I remember going online. I don't know whether you and your wife went to any of the online forums for bereaved parents and what those are like for you in the US, but there's not many of them here. Well, there weren't many of them in the UK in 2014. Excuse me. And I went onto one and sort of exchanged a few messages with people and found it a very supportive community. But after a couple of weeks, I stopped, and my husband was asking me why. And I said, I'll tell you why, because I'm communicating with people who are also bereaved parents. And I found that very comforting and supportive community that we all understood, right? It's the club that nobody wants to join, isn't it? So, we all understood each other. But I had this dawning realization over a few weeks as I got to know, but, sort of saw the same names coming up, thinking, my goodness, this person lost her son 12 years ago. And they were, still in a desperate state. And I thought, well, I lost my daughter weeks ago, so I can understand how she feels. But it was shocking to me. And this was, more common than not. And I remember saying to my husband, look, I feel terribly for these people, but that can't be me. For the sake of our children, I cannot be that person who is still in that hole, 8 years from now, bitter, looking for somebody to blame. Why me? I can't do that. I have to get my head out of that place and show my kids that, death is part of life.
Yeah.
And sometimes we encounter it when we really don't want to. And it's devastating. We didn't hide anything from our kids, even as little as they were, as I'm sure you didn't with your other daughter either. And we kind of embraced the experience together. They were at the memorial service. They, they made the decision for us all to drive to the memorial service with Romy's casket in a camper van. That's what my son wanted to do. So that's what we did.
That's cool. Yeah.
It wasn't a popular choice for some of our family members. Thought we'd lost it. But, it's like, look, this is really important that we respect and honor these things. Now, this is for us. It's how we want to remember her. But yeah, I did really want to give a strong message to other bereaved parents in particular that, it's not like you'll get over it. I can't bear that. I'm sure you've heard that a million times too. It's a dreadful thing to say to any bereaved individual. You never get over it, and you don't want to either.
Exactly.
Part of you wants to carry that with you because you're carrying your child with you always. But I do want to give the message that, what you can. It's just like stepping onto a different pathway. It's not the pathway that you wanted to walk with your child. You're walking without your child physically in a different direction, but they're still there, as you've said, that you still have that connection. You can never lose your connection with a child ever, no matter what you've been through or how they were in life, as you say with your the person you were talking to who had a very troubled her son had some troubles. It doesn't matter. We're all one. It's like we are all one. Love is what there is, and so it is. But this is the end of the day. This is my life, and I have to live it in a way that I'm proud to show my children, and I want my children to learn. And so I want my children to learn that if something devastating happens to you, you talk about it, you deal with it in the way that you know best, and then you carry on and you try your best to live your life with some kind of purpose and maybe some hope. I think that's the best gift we can give to our fellow bereaved parents and also to our kids.
Yeah, well, I think as a parent, and I remember those early days, and I empathize with those people because there's that first thing where it's like I don't want to get over it, and I'm very open with people. I'll tell them, when people tell me you're going to heal, or you're going to get better or whatever, I'm like I don't want to. But there's what we need to do is tell people you have permission to heal. You still carry your child with you. So I always hate the phrase moving on, because to me that implies that we're leaving them behind. I prefer moving forward. And there's a very small difference because we move forward with our children.
Absolutely.
And so what I love about your book and your story is that Romy is still a part of your story. She's still a part of your life. You are healing, you're thriving, you're modeling for your other children and for other parents that your life is okay, but Romy's still a big part of that. That's right. Yeah, absolutely. We in fact, it's we have her birthday coming up on the 26th of March, and something that I've always done. I bake her cake every year, and my kids. We've talked about this a lot. I will then go to. She has a resting place, which is a beautiful burial ground with it's a woodland burial. So obviously I visit there from time to time. I used to go every week. I used to have to go every week. I did that for a whole year until I had a newborn and the weather was bad, and then that was a difficult choice to make. But then I put flowers for her every week at home. But on her birthday, I bake her cake, and we all go to her place and we sing happy birthday and we eat cake. And it's a beautiful place to be. It's not a graveyard. There are trees growing, and it's a lovely environment. And we give our kids the choice every year. We say, look, this is something that I like to do, but you don't have to come. It's up to you. But they always want to come, probably because of the cake. But they always want to come, and it touches me even now. But my son's now 11. He always says, can I say something? He always wants to kind of say, cool. Give a little speech. That's really
or talk
cool.
to his sister. I like that we do those things. And she's very much a part of our lives. My older son, he's actually on the autistic spectrum. So he's an exceptional human being, and something that he still does that I actually find beautiful. But I think in the past it has slightly shocked some of my. He has a habit whenever we write a greetings card to somebody in the family, or he writes one for me, he will sign Romy's name in it. which I think is a beautiful thing to do. And it's something that I actually wanted to do myself a lot.
We still put Shayna's names on greeting cards.
That's amazing. I'm so happy to hear you say that.
Well, it was funny because we used to sign the greeting cards. It always, would start with me and my wife and then my older daughter and Shayna. And Shayna goes, "Why am I always last?" So we actually started putting her first on the greeting cards.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's really lovely. Well, yeah, Casper does this. He signs his sister's name in there, which I find that really touching.
Yeah, I think all your kids are they're connected, and I think with the I think even being on the autistic spectrum, I think that's a kind of a spirituality in of itself. So
yeah, that's a whole other conversation, right? He's really it's a sensitivity. It's a hypersensitivity.
Sure.
And he's taken his sister's passing in a completely different way, and he doesn't have the connection that my daughter has. But he has an understanding. There's an understanding there, as I say, like wanting to include her name. For him, she's still part of this family, and why would anyone possibly think that she wasn't? Just because you can't see her, she hasn't gone. He's an amazing. He's unique, and we're very privileged to have him in our family.
Well, really, really, Allie, it's been really great getting to know you and having this conversation with you. I want to make sure that everybody gets your name correct and your website. So it's Allie, A-L-I, Norell, Norell. So 1 R, 2 L's.
Correct. Yes.
And the website is allienorell.com. Again, Allie, N-O-R, 1 R, 2 L's. And the book is The Truth Inside. It's available on Amazon, and it's by O Books is the publisher.
O Books, yes, that's right.
Okay. And you can find Allie's blog on her website. So, Allie, really great talking to you. I really appreciate you doing this and telling us about Romy, and we're looking forward to reading her story.
Thank you, Brian. And likewise, thank you so much for what you're doing. What you're doing for the community of bereaved parents out there, I think is really wonderful. It's so, it's really heartening for me to see people like you out there showing people that it's possible to live positively in grief. I think that's a really valuable and precious job. So thank you for what you do.
Great. You have a great rest of your day.
And you. Thank you so much.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the episode. I want to make it really easy for you to reach me. So just send me a text to 31996 and simply text the word growth, GROWTH. In fact, you can right now just say, "Hey Siri," send a message to 31996. And when Siri asks you what you want to send, just say growth. You can do the same thing with OK Google. Thanks a lot. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks for listening to Grief to Growth. Brian hopes that you find this episode helpful and will come back for future episodes. Brian's best-selling book, Grief to Growth, Planted Not Buried, is a great resource for anyone who is coping with grief or knows someone who is. If you enjoy the podcast and would like to support it, there are 3 things you can do to help. The first is to share the podcast with someone that you think it will help. The second is to go to iTunes, rate, and review the episode. The third way you can support the podcast is by becoming a patron. Head over to www.patreon.com/grief2growth. That's patreon.com/grief, the number 2, growth, and sign up to make a small monthly donation. Patrons get access to exclusive bonus content and knowledge that you are helping to spread the message of grief to growth. For more about Brian and Grief to Growth, visit www.grief2growth.com.
Hi there. I hope you enjoyed this latest episode of the podcast, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. What questions came up for you? What did you like about it? What didn't you like about it? I invite you to visit us at grieftogrowth.circle.so. That's grief, the number 2, growth.circle.so to continue the conversation with me and with other listeners. It's a space to sound off, to share reactions, and to go deeper into the topics from the show. I look forward to chatting more, and I hope to see you there.